So saying I'm great when you feel self-doubting, in a way, is the worst thing you can do.
What's the best thing you can do?
Well, here's one of my favorite tests.
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
I'm curious, what have you learned in the last year and a half about getting back to like just being a confident human being in the world? Not even like performing well, in a sport or business, but just like, how do you just walk around with confidence?
I think, I think that in the first couple of months of the pandemic, people were in this phase that psychologists call the emergency phase of a long-term crisis, where adrenaline's pumping basically, and the threat is concrete, and people have shared goals, and they're really working well. It's sort of like in a war, it would be like the first battle.
Yeah.
And so people study combat soldiers and find that during battles they perform really well because they're on the same page. That's the threat. This is what we're doing. Teams work well. Good leaders are great leaders. But so that's how people were for the first couple months. They're like, I can do this. And then you deplete what psychologists call surge capacity, which is this sort of network that keeps us going during acute threats.
Right.
And so we depleted that. And then we all sort of went into this regression phase, or, at different times. But it had a lot to do with the depleted nervous system, but also just the lack of control. We lost control of our lives. There were external forces that we couldn't control. And that lack of real power, I think, translated into a lack of the feeling of power, of this more internal sense of agency and power. And so people, really started kind of shutting down. For me, I think as we kind of reemerge, and it's not going to be like, this is the end day, let's go celebrate in the streets. We know it's not going to, we're in this constant flux right now, which is also draining.
Yeah.
But as the only way we're going to reemerge is if we regain that sense of personal power. People have to feel that they have the ability to make change in their lives, to do things. I know it seems so simple, but we talk a lot about well-being, and we're usually talking about happiness and good physical health and lack of stress. Right? That's like high well-being. But I think another component that's really important is this feeling of power. And I don't mean power over others, personal power, right?
Power.
Not power over others, not zero-sum power, but just personal power.
How do we get to, what does that even look like? What is personal power, and how do we start to build it?
I think, it is the feeling that you are entitled to bring your best self to challenging situations. But that also involves knowing who your best self is. And that's difficult too. But I think often we don't even feel that we sort of deserve to be there. And so we can't fully show up. So personal power is the feeling of sort of being in control of our internal resources, to bring our skills and abilities forward, to be the most sort of generous, open-minded version of ourselves. That's personal power.
But if we don't believe that we are deserving to have power, how do we get there? How do we change the belief to deserve it and then start to have that?
And let me say first, I don't think personal power is not a substitute for skills and knowledge. And I think that sometimes people mishear me when I talk about this topic and think that I'm saying you can just fake it. You can't. For me, personal power is about revealing the skills that you already have. But it also gives you more bandwidth to build more skills. Right, so it's self-reinforcing as well.
Because there's a lot of people that already have developed skills, but they don't believe that they're deserving, or they don't know how to effectively communicate those skills.
Right.
Interesting.
That's right.
There's so many people that I've heard from that say they've had a dream for 5, 10, 20 years, and they have the skills to do it, but they don't have the courage to put it out there.
Yeah.
So is personal power connected to courage as well?
I think it absolutely is, and it's sometimes I say sometimes we have to get out of the way of ourselves so that we can be ourselves.
Yes.
Like we get in our own way, but I'm now writing about social bravery, right? Not physical bravery, but social bravery, like standing up for people who are being abused, who are being mistreated, or and it is hard, and it's harder in many ways than physical bravery. There's not a lot of glory that comes with it. You're risking, being kicked out of the tribe. But think about it in terms of like bystander intervention, like the studies of when do bystanders intervene in an emergency? The best predictor of adults intervening when another adult is being bullied online is sense of power, right? So yes, so when people feel powerful, they also feel more courageous.
Right.
And so I think yes, I think these things are very, very similar, and I think that we are in a collective sense of powerlessness right now. And so I just think it's everywhere, and people seem like agitated at each other. They turn on each other. We are turning on each other. I mean, you see it at the sort of group level, but also at the individual level, and that's what happens when people feel powerless.
What is the thing that we should be thinking of first? Is it, let's focus on healing the wounds of our past that have made us feel powerless. Let's work on developing new skills to make us feel more confident and competent. Let's focus on knowledge.
I don't. It's hard to say like what's first for it's idiosyncratic to the person.
Yeah.
So certainly for many people, powerlessness comes from trauma,
Right.
and obviously, there are different parts of the dealing with trauma process. But part of it obviously is understanding what happened and where that came from, and that's not who you were born as, right? And that you are allowed to undo this, right? So there is that, and I don't want to neglect that people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, they have to be able to deal with that.
What happens if we never undo or heal the traumas of the past, whether it be little micro traumas that just continue to build, or bigger traumas, abuse, accidents, big breakups, things like loss?
I mean, they build on each other. It's sort of that simple. Like it's traumatic events. The idea of triggers, right, is that when something reminds you of that traumatic event, that sort of neural pathway gets activated, and all of the feelings that went with that trauma that happened when you were 12 are now being activated when you're 40, and they're not helpful to you now, right?
They make you more powerless.
Right,
or
they might have
reactive.
helped you to kind of survive when you were 12, but not now. So, I think that I'm sensitive about this because people have just endured enormous trauma.
Yes.
And so some of it you just never get rid of, but not addressing it, I think only shuts us down more and probably makes it harder for us to know ourselves in many other, like we become afraid of ourselves. And that makes it, I think, harder for us to be a good partner in a relationship, a good member of society, to be somebody who's helping others.
What do you think we can do to reveal ourselves to ourselves better so that we can fully accept who we are, or what we've been through or had done to us or done to others, or whatever it is, the shame and guilt we're holding on to, so that we can have more personal power in an authentic way moving forward in those relationships?
Well, I think this is just a simple exercise. So there's this research on what we call self-affirmation. And I don't mean I don't know if you remember the old Stuart Smalley skits on Saturday Night Live. He was like a motivational speaker, and he'd say like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, doggone it, people like me. It was daily affirmations with Stuart Smalley, and by the end, he'd be in a shame spiral.
Okay.
Right? So he'd be trying to talk himself out of it by saying, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great.
Right.
That doesn't really work.
If you don't believe it.
Exactly. In fact, then you're just lying to yourself, and now you trust yourself even less. Right? So saying I'm great when you feel self-doubting, in a way, is the worst thing you can do.
What's
So-
the best thing you can do?
Well, here's one of my favorite tasks. So, actual like the theory of self-affirmation in psychology is not about saying I'm great, or I'm going to win this event, whatever. If
I'm
you
the
don't
best,
feel
and
that way, right?
yeah.
It is about affirming to yourself what your values are, who you really are, like what makes you you. So the task is so simple, and there's so much research on this, that doing this simple task helps people perform better in totally unrelated tasks. So the task is to first list maybe the top 3 things that you care most about, that really, if I took them away, you would just no longer be yourself, right?
What would those be for you? Couple things.
I have a kind of pathological optimism. Like, I think I am upset when somebody does something that hurts someone else in a way that some people might think is naive, but I'm glad I feel that way. I am so hurt that people behave badly. Like, I'm troubled by it, and I'm glad that I'm troubled by it, because
Right.
I'm going to keep on trying to change that. I think it's a kind of earnestness that people find it irritating, but I'm totally okay with earnestness. And actually, this is one of the things that Amy Purdy and I have in common.
Yeah.
Like, she is like this too. She's just like sad when people are mean.
Yes. She's
And
got such a great heart.
totally, but she does stuff. She's
Yeah.
not just sitting there being sad.
Right.
Anyway, I would say that is one of the things that makes me who I am. And if somebody said, you're just, you're naive and you really can't move forward in life if you hold on to this belief that people can be good, I'd be like, well, then I'm no longer who I am, right? So the task of self-affirmation is you list like 3 of these things, and then you rank them, and you maybe only ranking, them based on how you feel today, but then you take the top one. You write a paragraph about why it matters to you, and then you write another paragraph about a time when you were able to express that value, that belief, and what it felt like to do that. That's it. That's self-affirmation. And so, some people might say, being creative, like art is important to me, or, helping people in my community, whatever it is. When people do that, they then are less anxious in stressful situations, and they perform better.
Yeah.
So, for example, college students who do self-affirmation at the beginning of the semester perform better on their midterm exams, and have lower levels of epinephrine.
Really?
Than students who don't do that task.
Wow.
So, self-affirmation is basically you shoring yourself up. And what happens is that when you go in to take, like, say, a calculus exam, you know that no matter what happens during that exam, you will still be you when you leave. Like, no one's how you do in that calculus exam is not going to change who you are.
Interesting. Your value
Exactly.
of who you are.
I'm still going to be this person who wants people to be nice to each other.
So whether you win or get an A or get an F or you lose,
Right.
either way, you still have that value.
Exactly.
You're affirming the value that you love about yourself,
Right.
not related to the result or the outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you said, like, oh, I'm going to say that I love calculus, and then that would never work, right?
Right.
So it's about knowing who you are. You can't be great at everything. Sorry, you can't be perfect at everything.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. You will still be. You are allowed to be you.
Absolutely. It's interesting. It reminded me of I had Kobe Bryant on the show, and he mentioned that earlier in his kind of basketball years, when he was a teenager, one summer he was like playing at a basketball camp and he didn't score 1 point.
Wow.
And he was like 13 or 14. I can't remember exactly. And then 4 years later, he's in the NBA, right? So he was like 12 or 13, and he didn't score 1 point. And his dad, before he went to this kind of basketball camp, said, whether you do well or not, I'm going to love you. Like, your results
That's
are
really-
not determined based on like my love for you. So I want you to do well, but just have fun and get better. Just improve every day and work hard, and your value is not based on the results.
Yeah.
And he scored 0, but he felt like, okay, I just want to go back and keep playing because I love the game and I want to improve.
That's
Not because I'm
amazing.
looking for approval from my father.
Wow.
And I think it's as friends, partners, parents, if we can continue to instill that value of the person, not their results, then I think that it's going to help people want to get better results.
Right.
So without feeling like they're never good enough.
Right. What do you think? Like, what would you list?
So the thing of my values, or the thing that I want to get rid of, or what do you?
No, sorry, no, your values. Like, if you were doing self-affirmation, I mean, what would you feel? Like, what's the thing that makes you who you are?
I think that I really care about people, like
Yeah.
having a big heart. I
Yeah.
really care about people. I want people to feel good about themselves. I want people to have the confidence and the courage to go after what they were uniquely built and designed for, and having the curiosity to explore what it could be.
Yeah.
For me, it's we were talking about this beforehand, that I wasn't the biggest, fastest, strongest, but I had dreams and I pursued them to as far as I could in sports.
Yep.
And I have no regrets. Where there were a lot of guys that I knew that I played with were way more talented than me that didn't have the courage.
Yeah.
And I felt like, man, but you kind of wasted this potential.
Yeah.
Just like to see what could have happened. Whether you failed or not or succeeded doesn't matter for me. But it's what was I able to create in that process?
Yeah.
And I want the world to be able to do that for whatever it is for them. Whatever that dream is for them. It doesn't have to be some grandiose dream of being some top athlete, but whatever that is, you're unique in this world. Can you go and have the courage to figure out what that is? And it's
Love that.
scary.
Yeah.
So I care deeply about people overcoming those challenges.
I love that. And so, but imagine how it would feel if somebody was like, I'm taking that characteristic away from you. Like, you no longer
Yeah.
have that.
I would just be like, I don't know,
Right.
egotistical.
But that like you would be a shell,
Yeah,
right?
it'd be tough.
And so that. So this is the great thing about self-affirmation is it's kind of the flip side. Well, I'm telling you that that's never going to be taken away from you.
Right.
Right. You can always be that person.
Yeah.
You will always have that value, and so that helps you then to be more present and less anxious and to perform better in other situations.
Why do you think people are so afraid of the pressure of not performing well, or failing, or getting made fun of, or embarrassed, or laughed at, or being said, I told you so, you shouldn't do this, you're not good?
There's a lot of, like, you kind of answered the question in the question, because they are afraid of being told.
Yeah.
That, like, they're afraid of not doing well because they're afraid of being ashamed, like of being ridiculed, of being, I think, like, it's mostly about how others perceive them. Like, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being kicked out of the tribe, which is a terrible feeling, right? Like, I mean, people are more afraid of that than they are of, physical injury.
I know.
And it's sort of related to what we were talking about before the camera started rolling,
Yes.
which is that, this idea of bumblers and pointers,
Yes.
which a psychologist named Dan Gilbert just casually talked about once on Twitter. He said there are two kinds of people, bumblers and pointers. The bumblers are the ones just trying. Even if they don't do it well, they're trying. And the pointers are the ones making fun of the people who are trying. And he said, I would rather be a bumbler. I would definitely rather be a bumbler than a pointer. But people are afraid of the pointers, right?
Yeah, the critics that aren't actually bumbling.
Right, exactly.
Not only fumbling around in the
they're
world.
not bumbling because they're not doing anything.
Right. Except for critiquing.
Exactly. And I think that it doesn't divide quite as easily as
Right,
that.
right.
But
But why are
that's
we
what we're
so afraid
of.
of pointers, people pointing at us, when it's like, why in general are people so afraid of, like, it's two people or one person that's holding them back from a dream they've had for years?
I can make an evolutionary argument that we're attuned to that kind of rejection because it would indicate that you're at risk of being kicked out of the tribe, and if you're kicked out of the tribe, then you can't support
for yourself or
right?
something.
Exactly.
But that's not true anymore in this world, right?
No, right. So we still have, like, some sort of primitive responses that are no longer adaptive, and we're not, like, for example, and I'm sort of moving away from the shame a bit to fear. When we go into that fight, flee, or faint mode, that is adaptive if you're being chased by a tiger, but usually we're not being chased by a tiger.
Getting pointed at by someone on the internet is
Exactly.
not that scary.
Right,
I mean,
but that's
psychologically it is.
Well, it is.
Physically it's not.
And at the same time, I don't want to dismiss the emotional
Right.
damage of actual abuse and bullying.
Yes. But criticism.
Criticism,
Yeah.
right, is not actually deadly.
Right.
But our bodies, our nervous systems feel like it's deadly.
So, what is there a psychological strategy that you've seen or research that's shown how to actually practically overcome this?
I mean, there are little. I'm very much about like the micro, like what
Yeah.
are the little things that you can do. I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm a social psychologist, so I can't speak to therapy.
Yeah.
But I do think it's about the way we carry ourselves, like realizing that how we carry ourselves, like physically how we move, how do we interact with people, like how do we carry ourselves, that shapes who we are.
Physical body language.
Physical body language, and even just how we choose to interact with, say, someone who's serving us a drink at a restaurant. Do we choose to look them in the eye and say thank you and recognize them as human, or do we not have the time for that? Carrying ourselves in a way that is sort of both kind of powerful and also with grace, I think makes us more powerful.
Yes.
And makes us kinder people.
Yeah.
Sorry, that I got onto a different sort of.
Sure.
But
you're talking about the micro instances.
Yeah.
On how to overcome this if we're feeling like we've got something we want to put out in the world, but we're afraid of one or two pointers, critics,
Right.
that aren't going to physically beat us up or kick us out of their lives. But how do we?
So,
what's
like
something
in
we
the
can
moment,
do?
like if we let's take an actual, I often ask people, what is your biggest challenge? Like, what is the situation that you approach with dread, and that you execute with anxiety, and that you leave with a sense of regret?
Oh wow.
And so, if you look at so dread, that is you projecting yourself into a future that's not gone well. So you're borrowing trouble, basically.
Oh, wow.
The anxiety in the moment is you thinking more about what the other person thinks of you than what they're actually just thinking. You're worried about what you said a minute ago or what's going to happen afterwards. You're not able to be in the present. And then regret is, or what we call post-event processing. You're going over it, wanting a do-over, going, I wasn't seen, they didn't see who I am. You know that feeling like, oh, they didn't see who I am. And you want to go back in, and like in a rom-com, you get to have a do-over.
Right.
But
in life, sometimes you don't. Yeah.
Right. So that sense of regret becomes like a piece of baggage that you carry into the next similar situation, and
then you're worried because you don't want to do the same thing.
Exactly.
So you put more pressure on yourself.
What if we could, approach with this sense of, composure, and execute it with a kind of calm and grounded confidence,
Yes.
and leave feeling satisfied. Even if we don't get the outcome that we want, we know that we did everything we could to show up. They saw who I was, and it wasn't the right fit or whatever.
Right.
And I can accept that outcome. So you can both accept the outcome and not have that extra piece of baggage.
I was watching a TikTok recently about a mom like asking her daughter to go and, I can't remember, do something by herself in a store. And this was like an 18 or 20-year-old.
Yeah.
I think she was going to like rent a car or buy a car or something like that. But she was an older, teen or early 20s. And she was franticing. She was like, I cannot go in there alone. Will you come in there and do this for me? Will you come help me? I can't do this alone. This sense of like social interactions online, but the inability to actually be in front of someone and be rejected or looked at funny, or learning how to navigate in-person social interactions. Do you feel like people are going to be struggling with overcoming these fears more because of the internet and social media? Or how can they continue to navigate that fear of like the tribe in person, not just online?
I don't even know where to begin with the it's because there are also, first of all, like if I make any statement about where I stand on that, there will be a million people telling me I'm absolutely wrong. But,
Got it.
But,
Yes.
but that's like, and the truth is complicated,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
and in some ways, social media, like, so my son's on TikTok, and I can't believe the courage he has now to just put a video out there.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it goes and sometimes it doesn't. And he's fine if it doesn't go, if it doesn't move. So I think that's actually been really good for him. He doesn't feel rejected. He just feels like, well, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm never going to know if I don't put myself out there.
Right.
So I think in some ways, young people have become more courageous at trying things.
Right.
I mean, yes, I would like them to spend less time on it. And I like that he's doing music. He's like putting out, my kid's doing quality content.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, but I think that in some ways it's actually given young people an opportunity to be braver.
To express themselves
Yeah,
in certain
exactly.
ways.
And to sort of, to be rejected and see that they've survived. Right?
Yes. But
rejection, the rejection that I'm talking about is a TikTok video not going viral.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it's, which is not the same as nasty comments, like being rejected and trolled.
Right,
That's a different kind of rejection, right? And
Yes.
that's not
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah. What about the anxiety of putting yourself out there, whether it be going into a store and just interacting with people, whether it be giving a speech online, putting up, something human interaction in person and feeling embarrassed or rejected or made fun of.
Yeah.
How do we learn to overcome that anxiety or stress about it? Is it as simple as just you got to practice it and just know that you're alive?
I hate to say something so simple, but yes, like I am just not afraid to embarrass myself.
That's good.
And I have to sometimes like hold on to that, like, because I think it was really important for my son to see that. Like to me, modeling that was really important.
Not being embarrassed.
Yeah, making mistakes, being
Yes.
goofy, like doing something goofy in the grocery store.
And being okay with it.
Yeah, another one is it's being okay with like chatting with a stranger, and maybe they don't want to chat, and that's fine. Then you move on. But like,
Right.
why not try? Those, I think, doing those things. First of all, I think it's great to model that for kids, but I also think it's good to do it just to see that you've survived. You're fine.
Yeah.
No
It's not
one
the end of the
cares.
world.
Exactly. No one even cares.
They're not
in fact,
remembering this for the rest of their
you
life.
might have made somebody smile.
Right.
Right. So
I'm all about creating social challenges for yourself. Like if you're terrified
well,
of,
I think that's a good one. I mean, like, chat with someone on the train, and I know it's hard right now.
right. But do something consistently.
Yeah, or like ask someone. If you're I don't know why grocery stores seem like places where lots of silly things can happen. If someone's like checking you,
Checking you out.
checking
Yeah.
you out, but that sounds funny.
Yeah,
checking
yeah.
you out, you know
Checking
what I mean?
out
Like checking
your
out your
groceries,
groceries,
yeah.
and they are looking down and they seem grumpy. Instead of deciding they're not friendly, consider the possibility that they're having a bad day, and literally like pause and say, "How are you?" Or like try to connect with them without being intrusive. Make eye contact with them. Thank them. Make eye contact. Maybe they'll just be annoyed and not make eye contact
Right.
back. But I feel like that kind of thing is really important to try. And those are things that create sort of social benefits for others as well.
Absolutely. This is something you've been studying for, I guess, decades now, which is just mastering confidence, body language, overcoming these challenges. What's been the biggest challenge for you in the last 10 years that you've had to overcome, knowing the research and practicing these things and talking about these things yourself? What's been the challenge for you, whether career or personal or?
I think the challenge for me has been adjusting to, being more well-known than the average academic, right?
Right.
And actually, leaving academia. I still teach, but I'm not
Full time.
no. I teach in executive education at Harvard, but I'm not a professor. I'm a lecturer when I lecture. That leaving was hard.
Really?
So I mean, it was a big leap to leave that security. But it just was not the right world for me. But I think the biggest challenge really has been dealing with becoming higher profile, and the kind of backlash that I endured as a result of that.
Criticism.
Which is not, yes. And well, yeah, I mean, criticism's fine, but bullying is not,
Right,
you know?
right.
And I know that this is common. Like this happens to, in fact, it happens to a lot of junior professors who give TED Talks.
Really?
Yeah. It's funny, somebody just wrote to me yesterday. She has a popular TED Talk, and she said that at her university, people started calling her TED Girl and like sort of talking down to her.
Even though it was a popular, well-respected TED Talk.
Because it was popular, right? Like it's like if it had not really hit the radar, it would have been okay.
Really? But
it
because
was
she
sort
had
of
some
like,
success.
yeah, so people had to sort of diminish her in
Really?
a way, you know, and I experienced a lot of the same stuff. So what became hard for me was talking to colleagues, right? Like standing up for myself. And you know, the truth is we need to stand up for each other, right? When people are in an acute bullying situation, they really can't stand up for themselves. But I'm still figuring out how to engage with other people in academia who weren't necessarily bullies, but might have been bystanders who didn't do anything. But to be able to say, I still deserve to be having this conversation. I deserve to have the beliefs that I have. I deserve to defend, this massive area of research on body-mind feedback, of which I contribute a tiny bit to.
Right.
Just because these people don't like it doesn't mean I can't, say, well, here's why I do believe it. That's really hard for me.
Yeah.
That is the thing that I would approach with the most dread, I think.
Were you able to implement and integrate some of your own practices and teachings when those things happened to you? When you were getting, whether it be criticism or bullying or, any of the stuff you were facing, were you able to actually integrate the body language for yourself?
I mean, for me, the thing that works the best is, certainly I do. Like I walk expansively, like
Yes.
I like long strides before this kind of stressful thing. I won't sit down with my hands in my lap.
Right.
Like even putting your hands behind your chair, like this is a big
Kind of opens you up a little bit.
but it forces you to
Yeah.
open up just
Yeah.
doing that. But the thing that works the best for me is breathing. And I know there is so much on breath work now, and I don't want to, I'm not an expert, but the relaxation response that's triggered by certain breathing patterns is incredibly effective for me. And so basically it sends your nervous system into this rest and digest state, which is the opposite of fight, flee, or faint. And so the one that I like best is called 4-7-8 breathing. And we can do it right now.
Yes, do it.
So so basically for 4 counts you inhale, for 7 you hold your breath, and for 8 you exhale.
Okay.
So I'm going to count and you do it.
Okay, 4
Okay.
inhale.
7 hold it,
And
8
8.
exhale.
Okay,
All
cool.
right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And then you
That's
repeat
it.
that a few times? or
3
you just do-
times.
yeah.
Like one time you feel it.
Yeah.
It will put me to sleep at night. If
Yeah.
I'm relaxed, it makes me sleepy. But if I'm anxious, it calms me down.
Mm-hmm.
So that just, there's just so much research on the relaxation response and breathing. But what I think is interesting about it is that that kind of breathing is expansive. Just like what I talk about, expansive posture, that's expansive. You're breathing deeply and slowly. You're taking up more temporal space. You're expanding your, your physical body more. And when we expand, we tend to feel more confident, more powerful, more calm.
Should we always, not always, should we frequently be in an expansive postural state
Well,
when we're, kind of 9 to 5-ish out in the world doing our activities?
what we should be in is having good neutral posture. So it's before stressful events, that's when I say find a private space. I think I said in the TED Talk, find a bathroom stall,
Right.
which I honestly think just like I thought of at the moment, but I can't tell you how many emails I get from people who are like, I was in a bathroom, or like people who see somebody in a bathroom with their arms up in the air, they're like, are you power posing in it?
I think in Ted Lasso was saying she goes to the bathroom and does that, right?
I know, I loved it so
That's so
much.
good.
You can't imagine, like I love that show, and I had no idea
You had
that
no idea it was
gonna
coming.
I was like sobbing. I was like, oh my
What's
God.
so cool that you, Brene Brown, and Esther Perel,
Yeah.
who I've had both of them on as well, were all featured in there. And I'm just like, that's amazing.
I know. And I think all of us were absolutely
Like, this is
beyond
cool.
thrilled, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, to have that, and I know I was telling Brene this, but the first time I saw that show, I at the end of the first episode, I turned to my husband and I said, I love Ted Lasso. And
It's
he
so
goes,
good.
that's because you are Ted Lasso.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, well, I guess I had good self-esteem then. But I am Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
and so are you.
Yes,
right?
exactly,
You
yeah.
are. It's,
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
it's funny because Brene says that she's Roy Kent.
Yeah, I can see.
She's more
I can see
Kent.
that. You can see a little bit.
But anyway, yeah. So before these stressful situations, the ones that you approach with dread, that's when you find some space and really make yourself big.
Expansive.
Like whatever
Yeah.
feels comfortable to you, expand. You know, in front of other people, it comes across as really aggressive and
Yeah.
domineering and off-putting. But if you're in, the privacy of your own bathroom stall or office or whatever, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about cultural norms or putting people off. In our everyday lives, we spend so much time like this, like
Yeah,
with our
slunched over,
phones,
yeah.
and that is really bad. First, it's bad for us. Just our posture, and it's creating this sort of fixed thoracic stoop
Yeah.
that physiotherapists used to only see in like elderly people,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're seeing it in like 15-year-old boys from gaming and
Right.
things like that. And that's something like you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to sit up straight. You have to like work that
For
out.
years working it
Exactly.
out, and align your body. Yeah.
Totally. But so it's not only hurting our posture, but I believe that it is affecting our mood. And so, even just set up your workspace so that you can be more expansive.
Yes.
But we neglect our body language when we're alone because it's language. And if we're alone, we're not talking to anyone,
We're talking to ourselves,
but we're
though.
talking to ourselves, right? So it's really important, I think, for us to be minding our posture. Also, there have been a couple of meta-analyses recently, which basically are just, studies that look at all of the studies on a topic and come up with a sort of an average effect size. Like they say, yes, this is a real effect, and this is how big the effect is, right? So studies that have looked at meta-analyses of power posing studies show really clearly that it affects the way we feel. Like expansive.
By shrinking our body,
Shrinking versus expanding.
affects the way, whether in a
Right.
positive or
More expansive, more confident, and more powerful psychologically. Shrinking, less powerful, less
Really?
confident. But what's interesting is that there are two meta-analyses. One of them shows that more of the effect is driven by the difference between neutral and expansive. The other one shows that more of the effect is driven by the difference between, contractive and neutral. So we still, in short, there's evidence that both of those things matter, but certainly neutral is better than contractive.
Shrinking, yeah,
exactly,
contracting.
exactly.
And it's probably, even if you were doing a meditative breathing technique, if you're closing your body off and breathing, you're still probably limiting yourself.
Yep.
So you can be breathing and trying to relax the nervous system, but you're closing your body off. It's hard to feel like more alive and confident and calm, I'm assuming,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
It's funny, this woman wrote to me, she said, I teach people public speaking, and I had this student who was really stressed out, this man, and so I got him to power pose for a minute, and he said it made him feel worse.
Really?
And she said, but then we watched the video, she said I videotaped him, and we watched the video, and I was like, were you breathing? He said, no, I didn't breathe. I held my breath the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, you're
so
gonna
now
pass
try
out.
it
You're
and
gonna faint.
exactly. So he had been like completely still in this power pose, and she was laughing about it. But yeah, you have
How
to
long?
breathe.
How long should we be in an expansive postural states for?
It's funny. I really emphasized 2 minutes in the TED Talk because
Yeah.
that's what we had done in those first studies. I think actually less is more. Like
Really?
we've gone out to 5 minutes. I think that it just gets awkward. It's that silly. Like you feel weird, but also like your body you get sort of stiff. So I just think I don't even think you have to be still. I think you can be moving in an expansive way.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the whole. I sometimes wish that I hadn't called this power posing because it was it's such a sticky idea, right? It's
Yes.
got alliteration. It's
Great
you know,
branding.
exactly,
Great branding.
exactly. But at the same time, people got fixed on like standing like Wonder Woman or in the victory pose, and it's not. It's being expansive is more expansive than this.
Yes.
You know, it's in whatever way works for you.
Yeah, the tighter you are, the probably less likely you'll perform relaxed.
Right.
And football training before games and in practices, they would always tell us to be loose.
Yeah.
You know, to move our body to be flexible, to be expansive, but in a loose state of mind and a loose body, not like rigid or you can't catch the ball if you're like too tight. So it's how can you be expansive, confident, and relaxed at the same time?
Yeah.
And practicing that in life with the power poses, I think is great.
Yeah.
And Ted Lasso, she did it great. She was like, right? She
Oh
looked like
my
a
gosh.
monster pose or something. It was
I think
awesome.
she was like,
It's amazing.
she
Yeah.
made this facial expression that I thought was great.
She's a great actor as
Gosh,
well.
she's so. I wonder if that was like so. If they were like just do a power pose
Off the
and
cuff,
she made it
yeah,
up.
she probably did.
I just feel like
She was great. She was
so
great.
good.
When was there ever a time where you didn't implement this strategy and you realized, oh, I could have done better had I done this, but I just thought I'd had it figured out.
only it's fun. So I really love public speaking, and
Yeah.
it's like my favorite professional thing to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me nervous.
That's good.
So for me, I think a lot of people assume that speaking is the thing that makes everyone nervous. So for me, it's not that.
What makes you nervous?
Interpersonal conflict, like one-on-one, or I get nervous in like smaller groups. I don't.
Isn't it interesting? Like 5 or 10 people. I
like
feel the same
talking
way.
to 3 people, I find much more stressful
Yeah.
than talking to 3,000 people. So I don't like to sit in a room for a long time before I'm going to get up and talk to people. I don't want to sit there in a cold room. These rooms are often cold, and
Yeah.
you're going like this, and you're totally sort of stiff, and then
Yeah.
you get up and you're like, ooh. So I had that experience enough times to learn I need to be moving around. I need to be warm, not cold, and come in sort of right before I get up to present or
Yes.
to discuss. So yes, I've had the experience of being still and kind of hunched up for too
Right.
long.
So we've got the affirmations we talked about, self-affirmation, affirming who you are, not just making up lies about yourself.
Right.
We've got, what's the actual technical term now? Not power posing, it's
I call
Postural-
it postural feedback.
postural feedback.
Right, and I think the idea is just keep in mind your posture is sent. There is feedback
Yes.
to your nervous system telling you either I'm safe or I'm not safe. It's kind of that simple. Like
Yeah.
you're safe or you're not safe.
It's interesting, I learned a technique 11, 12 years ago, about 2009, when I got into the business world and I started going to events and conferences and networking events. I remember feeling like I'm a nobody. I'm this young kid who was just playing football. I still didn't have a college degree. I was 24. And going into a room with all these professionals and executives. I was
Yeah.
like, why would anyone talk to me? Kind of had this feeling early on.
Right.
And I learned from someone, he said, every time you walk into a door, just act like you're trying to connect the top of your head to the door. And just walk in
Oh, yeah.
and stand. Like every time you see a door at any time in your life, just
Yeah.
practice you're walking, you're entering a room just with you don't have to put your chest all the way out like crazy, but
Right,
just
exactly.
shoulders back just a little bit, your head just a little bit taller, like you're trying to touch the top.
Absolutely.
And he said, walk in with a smile.
Yeah.
And every time I do that, I practice it just all the time now. It's like, it just makes you feel a little bit better, more courageous
Absolutely.
to actually say hi to someone. A
Yep.
smile, a little taller, your shoulders back just a little bit.
Yeah.
It really helps with that. So it's something that I learned early on that helped me kind of just gain courage.
Well, it's in ballet, it's it's very
Yeah.
much like imagining
like
that
a string, right?
strings
Yeah.
going through. But another technique that I think works really well for me that I learned in ballet is you're looking at the people in the balcony, and And that opens you up,
Yes.
right? And it also makes you more aware of this interaction, and there's also kind of magic and chemistry in the interaction, right? You're not alone.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other,
Yeah.
well, not a whole other thing, but it's, that ability to be present with people
Sure.
is like, it feeds on itself, right?
Yes.
Like you become, the energy level picks up more and more the more you can build that intimacy with an audience. And so by opening up to them, you're much more likely to create that intimacy.
Yeah. And so, okay, so we've got the self-affirmation to self. We've got the postural feedback. If we can start implementing these strategies.
Yep, I got another one.
Give me another one.
All right. I love this one. So this was research done by a woman named Alison Wood Brooks, who's at Harvard Business School. She's a professor. And she was like a wedding singer before she went to grad school.
Okay.
And she just didn't get nervous. And she was really interested in stage fright. Like she was like, why do, I know it's kind of funny. She's like, this isn't hard for me. Why is it hard for you? No, but she's
Right.
very confident. But she was really interested in stage fright. And she realized
And learning
that,
why people have stage fright.
right,
'Cause
and
she
she's
didn't
a
have it.
very positive person. And I think that what happened, and I don't want to like tell her story for her, but my understanding is basically that she realized that for her, the nerves, so basically, emotions have two dimensions: arousal level, like it's a high arousal or a
Excitement
low arousal,
and the fear, right? Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
and positive, negative. I mean, there's more than that,
Yes.
but like think of it. Those are the two dimensions, and emotions can be clustered around those. So she realized that she was having the same high arousal feeling in her body before she sang, but for her, she interpreted it as excitement,
Not fear, not-
anxiety.
yeah.
And so she realized that it's not that she really was having a totally different experience. It's just that she was like, I must be excited to do this.
It's the interpretation.
Exactly. So she did
Interesting.
experiments. She had people do singing contests using like, what was the video game? Rockstar? Was it Rockstar? What was
Might
it
have been
called?
Rockstar, yeah.
She had them do like debate competitions. I think they did a math test, maybe different studies. But she assigned them to say to themselves before they did the thing, I am anxious or I am excited. And the people who said I am excited just said I am excited to myself. They did much better.
Yes.
So she calls that reinterpreting anxiety as excitement. So reframe it. Like, so before you
this?
go on, her name is Alison Wood Brooks, hyphenated.
Okay.
And yeah, so anxiety is, reframe anxiety as excitement. And this is definitely one of my favorites. And I think that helps a lot of people. The other one is,
I
and
love
it's
that, yeah.
kind of related a bit, is that a lot of times when we go into these stressful interpersonal situations where we know we're being evaluated and where the stakes feel high, so like a job interview or giving a talk or speaking in class or teaching, whatever, the dread leads us also to interpret other people, to see them as potential predators, as people who don't want us to do well.
Yes.
And the thing is, mostly in life, people actually want other people to do well. Yes, there's schadenfreude. We sometimes like to see somebody fail, right?
Right.
But for the most part, people are there because they want to learn something. They want you to do well. And so, it's not comfortable to watch people not doing well. And so when I started teaching at Harvard, I taught at Kellogg for a couple years, and that's an intense place. It's a great
Sure.
school, but there's something about Harvard Business School that has this reputation, and so I got there and I was like, I don't know, 32 or something, and no, I was like mid-30s.
Yeah.
Not that much older than the students, right?
Right,
So
right, right.
I
You're
felt
still
like,
like-
and
You could look like you could
and
be a
I was,
student. Yeah.
I'm not big and, blonde, I'm a girl, right, all that stuff.
Yes.
So people were like, you cannot show weakness.
Really?
Like you cannot, a drop of blood in the water, the sharks will come in for the kill.
That
so
bad,
that was
huh?
that's what I was told, right? And so I prepared like crazy for that first class.
For these 18-year-olds, you mean?
Well, no, they're like 20, this
Grad
is HBS,
students.
so they're
Okay,
they're
got it.
like 28.
Okay, got you.
They're pretty smart, they're
Right,
pretty
right,
accomplished.
right.
Like
They've
they got
already
in,
accomplished stuff in their
exactly.
life and their bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really prepared like crazy, but I realized that I was approaching it with this like as a warrior. And like, first of all, that's not who I am.
Right.
And second,
The roller skating warrior.
Yeah, exactly. The roller skating deadhead warrior.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I like people, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, why would I assume that they are looking for me to fail, that they're like sniffing blood? That doesn't make sense. They paid a lot of money to go here.
learn.
They worked like crazy to get in here. They want to have a good experience, not a bad experience. So I decided to go in with blind trust, like blindly trusting them, and not try to sort of fake this, badass sort of, personality that isn't who I am. Instead, to go in and be who I am, assume they want me to do well. And so I went in the first day and I said to them, here's what I've done. Here's what I love doing. I've not done this before. And I'm a little nervous about this, but I think that we are all in this together and I think we want to have a good experience. So just kind of letting you know where I am. And I feel I'm in touch with so many of the students from that year, that first year. I think.
Was this pre-TED Talk?
It was like a year or two before,
Okay.
3 years maybe before my TED Talk. And that really taught me that if I trust them, they give it back to me, right? You build trust. So I go in with blind trust. I mean, if you think about like in life, you can either in these situations trust or not trust. Like which mistake would you rather make? Would you rather trust and be wrong or not trust and be wrong? Like I'd rather trust and be wrong. Usually it's not that dangerous.
Right.
I mean, there are some situations where you probably shouldn't trust, but I'm talking about just like average situations. Why not just trust and occasionally you be wrong and somebody actually is
Right.
right?
And they
Like,
humiliate you or they are
but
whatever, but you move on.
totally. But if you go in and you don't trust anybody, nothing good comes of that. If they're trustworthy, you're not going to build a relationship with them. If they're untrustworthy, you're not going to build a relationship with them anyway. I would just
Yeah.
rather make the error of over trusting than under trusting.
Wow, that's cool. What did you learn from that first year of teaching at the crazy shark
First
school?
of all, they're
Yeah.
not. They're people just like everybody
Yeah.
else. Like they've got insecurities too.
Yeah.
And like 75 to 85% of HBS students at some time feel imposter syndrome. Like they're insecure as well. Like I mean, they're no more insecure, but they've got the same stuff that they're
Yes.
dealing with. And there are a lot of like really wonderful people in there. And the more you give them trust and get it back, the more they're building trust with each other. So I just learned to go into every audience and assume that they want me to do well.
That's good.
And that of all of the things, it's funny because my son, he gets performance anxiety like probably every musician, and it's funny because people are always like, can't you? Like, this is your thing. To me, they're like, how does your son have any performance? I'm like, well, he's human, but also I'm his mom, right?
Yeah.
So it's not easy to learn this stuff from your mom.
Of course.
But that's the one that works the best for him. I said, why would you go in to a performance situation, a musical performance situation, and assume they want you to fail? They don't want you to fail. They want to see you do well.
They want to be there. They want to be there.
really want to be there, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So he says that's the one that helps him the most.
And just having that thought in your mind before you enter that they want the best for me. They want to have a good time.
Yeah.
Something I was nervous for a long time was public speaking, and I did a social challenge for myself where every week I went to Toastmasters.
Yeah.
And the first week I wrote out word for word my 5-minute speech, which is called an icebreaker.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Toastmasters or if you've been before.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, I prepared for 2 weeks for a 5-minute speech. I was so terrified.
Yeah.
Again, I was 24, going into a room of really great speakers who were all much older than me, executives, professional speakers. And I chose that one. I went to 5 different Toastmasters clubs in Columbus, Ohio. And I chose that one because it was the scariest for me.
That's
And I was like, I don't want to go to the easy place. I want to go to a place that's going to really challenge me. And it terrified me. I remember I wrote it out word for word and I practiced it for a couple of weeks. And I could not look up the first time. I had to stay here, looking here word for word and dripping sweat, just humiliated and embarrassed. But luckily, they're there to give you positive feedback.
Right.
It's not a bad crowd.
Right, they are. That's true.
It's not like I'm putting myself in front of, critics that are really going to make me feel bad. They're there to say, here's what you did well, here's what you can do better next time. But I did that for a year until I felt like I had the confidence and I could go out and get paid to do it. And for years, I would go speak in front of big audiences and get paid well, but I still had a little bit of nerves. And I was like, why have I not gotten rid of this? And I called one of my coaches. This was probably like 5 years ago. I called one of my coaches and I said, I don't know why I'm still nervous before these events. I've been doing this for so long. I shouldn't be. Now I'm beating myself up. I shouldn't be nervous now. And he said, the reason you're nervous is because you're still worried about what people think about you. You're still thinking of you, like making sure you remember that joke or making sure you're funny here or you don't mess up. Or what if I forget this thing? You're thinking about
that's
that.
The distraction, right?
And he was like, if you just put your attention on how can I be of service, knowing I'm not going to be perfect. How can I help and add value and entertain or educate, knowing I'm going to forget a joke or knowing that the pause isn't going to be there or knowing that I'm going to stutter. Just let it go and just be of service. And when I came from that place, I was like, I'm just going to serve. And I know I'm not going to be perfect.
I love that.
And that has helped me let go of those nerves. I still feel like, the excitement feeling.
Yeah.
But it's more like, okay, every time I feel like I'm nervous or anxious, this is all about service.
Yeah.
And my friend Rory Vaden says it's hard to be nervous when your heart's on service.
That's so true.
And so I just give your heart to the audience.
That's the sort of, it's very related to this trust piece, right? Like they want to get something out of this.
Yes.
That made me think of two things. One was that I once asked the person at HBS who I thought was like the best teacher. I said to her, when did you realize that you it's clear that she knows she's really good at this, right? Like when did you realize that? And she said, I went from being a good teacher to a great teacher the moment that I stopped thinking about what they were thinking of me and started just thinking about what they were thinking. Right? So I cared about what I started watching their faces. Were they confused about something I said? So it wasn't about me. It was about the content.
Yes.
And helping them to learn.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really good. Stop thinking about what they're thinking of you and start thinking about what they're thinking.
Why is that so hard for us to do in general?
Well, it's back to that social rejection piece. Because we're evolutionarily attuned to looking for signals that we're going to get kicked out.
Right.
And I don't know why we're still like that, and I don't know of a culture where people aren't like that. It's not like I can think of a society where people don't have that happening.
Yeah. So that was one thing you said you were going to say. Do you remember the second thing?
No,
that was a great example.
Oh no, I did remember actually. It's that people love. Okay, so the best performances are performances that have never happened before and will never happen again. So in front of a live audience. Like when you go see part of why I love the Grateful Dead, the Dead and Company, is because they have never played the same show twice. Like every single show, thousands of shows, is completely different. They've never played the same set list for the entire set list twice.
They always change it.
Never, yes.
Wow.
And
it might be one song different and replaced, but
it's really mixed up.
Really?
Like it's really changed,
That's
and there are
cool.
all these jams in between. So there are just no two shows that are even close to being identical.
That's cool.
And that's part of what people love about it. They don't. Yes, sometimes they forget the lyrics, but that's because they've got 500 songs
So
in their
many songs.
catalog, right?
Wow.
So, but nobody cares. In fact, last night at Chula Vista, Bob Weir forgot the lyrics. It just for a minute, and people loved it. The crowd roared. They love that.
They're cheering him on to remember it again.
Yeah, and it's just you're real. You're here with us. You are being here with us. So I always say, give people an experience that has never happened before and that will never happen again. That doesn't mean you have to rewrite a completely new speech, but know that audience, know who they are. And don't be over-scripted. People want it to be a bit raw.
Yes.
And they remember the performance where somebody dropped their guitar pick and had to pick and didn't have another one, or it's like I got to see that thing.
Yeah, the mic went out and you had to scream or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
So I think that making mistakes actually is not only not bad, but it's it makes you more human and relatable.
More interesting.
More interesting, right, and more memorable for sure.
Exactly.
More memorable.
Identity came to my mind just now, and I'm curious about your research or just your personal findings on shaping our own identity with ourselves, shaping our identity, having an identity, and how that helps us, how that either helps us or hurts us with our confidence and our personal power.
Well, I mean, there's so many different kinds of identities that we can have. I think that when we get, I mean, there's
is it important to have a specific type of identity? Is it important to have a wide range of identities, of things that we're into?
Like, tell me what kind of identity you're talking about.
Like an identity is, I'm a man from Ohio. I grew up in Ohio.
Okay.
I love football.
Right.
I love all these different things that are likes, interests, and we identify as.
Well, I think that we like the self-affirmation stuff is all about values, right? And so your identity, your identity is your values, and that I think is great. Being true to your values is great. The values I'm talking about are not values that need to be flexible. They can be wide,
yes.
right? But I think that when we get really identified with a certain group or interest, it can get dangerous. I mean, I think first we stop thinking for ourselves, and we start becoming much more concerned about remaining part of the group than about
our value, our personal values.
Exactly. And so we compromise ourselves to be in the group. And I think that can be really dangerous. Like, we're losing our sense of agency for sure, but also, might be doing things that are not good.
Right.
Like, not healthy for us or for other people. So that I think I think we need to stay in check around identity in that way. Just because it's what most people in the group are doing doesn't mean it's what I need to be doing.
What is something we can do, I guess, to reflect on or give ourselves feedback on a yearly or monthly or daily basis that supports that? I
think and this is not empirical. This is kind of off the cuff, but I've been thinking about this a little bit lately. Like, thinking about what are my identity groups that I chose? Like, what are my chosen identity groups? And are there things that have happened in those identity groups that I don't agree with, but I didn't do anything to correct it, or I kind of let it slide? Like, how can I keep myself honest about these identity groups?
Right.
So
because you may like the Grateful Dead,
right?
But there may be things that happen at the concerts that you don't acknowledge or you don't like. But
yes, exactly.
You don't want to be, I'm never going to watch or support the Grateful Dead again because this happened.
That's right.
But how can I make sure, I can enjoy a hobby and an interest,
totally.
but not the identity of that thing.
That's right. And so I think that, there are things that happen at shows that I, haven't been liking lately. Like, we talked about this a bit, like people being very territorial in the front space, which is called the pit, about their space, and being really nasty to each other. And it kind of goes against, to me, the whole sort of essence of that community. And I get angry about it, like, but part of it feels like righteous anger. Like, I want you to not be that way, but I also need to check myself. Like, I don't want to contribute to the anger either. But it also doesn't, because it's imperfect, doesn't mean that I have to leave it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I get into I get into that trap sometimes.
Really?
I sort of get into the oh, there's something wrong. I probably shouldn't do this anymore. And I need to accept that nothing's perfect. And I'm still allowed to love imperfect things as long as I'm checking myself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
I feel
sense.
like I kind of...
No, it makes sense. Yeah, for sure. There's we talked about this a little bit earlier about the kind of fake it till you make it thing, but it's more of like facing it till you make it, I think is how you reframe it, right?
I say fake it till you become it.
Fake it till you become it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's hard to, why is fake it till you make it harmful? If it's like, let me just keep faking and hopefully it'll happen.
I think the problem, and it depends on how people interpret
yes.
it, I realize, but the way I interpret fake it till you make it is kind of like, sort of, the slick salesperson who really does not buy what they're selling, but they're gonna sell hard.
Right.
And never and they're going to be faking that. They will. Yeah, that making it might be, being promoted or making a lot of money, but they're still faking it, right? You don't really ever faking it till you make it means faking it, getting the promotion and continuing to fake it,
yeah.
right? Fake it till you become it, and it's also about what you're conveying to other people. Faking it till you become it. The way that I think of this is you're tricking yourself into believing in yourself, right? You're tricking yourself into, like incrementally be a little bit more courageous.
Every time, yeah.
And eventually you become the person that you are in your mind's eye as your best self, right? So you're not becoming, you're basically, it's like, I kind of think of it visually like, you're this, we're not just shells, but think of yourself as a shell and you're sort of half full. Faking it till you become it is sort of filling that shell more and more and more.
You're
until it's
partially,
complete.
you're
Right,
partially it, but
exactly.
you're not fully
You're
it.
getting there.
Because imposter syndrome is a term that's been thrown around a lot in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it all the time. Everyone's saying, not everyone, but a lot of people are saying, I feel a sense of imposter syndrome, like I don't belong, or I'm not ready, or I don't have the, whatever.
Right.
For me, I felt like I had nothing at the beginning, and I was just like, I'm just going to throw myself in, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, I have nothing to embarrass myself because I had nothing. I was living on my sister's couch for a year and a half. I had no money. I didn't have a college degree. So I was like, there's nowhere else I can go that's worse than where I'm at.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
I was just like, I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to throw myself in there and hopefully certain things happen. So I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like I'm an experience and I need to figure out how to gain experience by learning skills, by finding mentors, by reading, by consuming content, and developing more confidence. But why has imposter syndrome become such a popular phrase? And is there a way to actually overcome it? Or are we always going to kind of feel like imposters if we're constantly growing? Because
Yes.
there's a new thing that next year I've never done that I'm going to try to do that I'm an imposter because I've never done it. So I'm going to feel a sense of, oh, well, I've never done this, so here we go. If
Yeah.
I'm growing as an individual, right?
Well, it's
We should always feel it in a sense.
Definitely. So I think, okay, to the question about, well, I don't know why it became, it's a catchy, it's a sticky term to describe an experience that's pretty universal. And so it became, it's funny because it's to social psychologists, it's like a thing we've talked about since the 1970s. Not that I was talking much in the 1970s, but that it was coined in the 1970s, and it's so in academia, it's something we talk about. But it really got sticky in the last, I do think that I talk about it in the TED Talk. I think that was part of it. I think there were some other books that came out that were talking about it, and it just captures the experience so well of feeling like an imposter in your own life, right? But the interesting thing is that, first, the woman who coined the term, Pauline Clance, who was teaching at Oberlin at the time in the 70s.
In Ohio?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, Ohio.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm feeling
My
your
identity.
identity.
My identity.
Exactly. You feel good about it. So first of all, she says that she wishes she had not called it a syndrome, because a syndrome implies that it's pathological and rare, like it's unusual, and it's actually so not unusual.
It's common,
right?
yeah.
It's there are different estimates, like 75 to 85% of people feel imposter syndrome. Also, women do not experience it more than men. Men are just less likely to openly talk about it.
Yeah.
So when it's anonymous, which is a burden, I think,
And then they
on
hold
men,
on to it.
because
Yeah,
they think they're the only ones feeling it.
Yes, they feel alone.
And
in
then
that,
women
yeah.
get the burden of being like, oh, you always feel like imposters, right? So it cuts both ways in bad ways. But I don't think many people stop feeling it if they keep on trying new challenges.
Yes.
So in my book, I interviewed Neil Gaiman, the amazing author of, many, 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 many bestsellers and super award winner.
Yeah.
And anyway, Neil really had bad, part of why I interviewed Neil is he's a lovely human, but he's one of the only men who talked openly about having imposter syndrome. And so I wanted to talk to him for that reason. On also he has a way with words, but he said that in the beginning, when he first started writing and was successful, he kept being afraid that somebody was going to come and tap him on the shoulder and be like, are you Neil Gaiman? And he'd say, yes, I am. Say, oh, sorry, we made a mistake.
Oh, wow.
We're taking all this back. And then he said he finally got to the point, he'd written American Gods, which was like his big novel, he said. Like that was the big, grand novel. And he said he thought he had finally conquered imposter syndrome. And he spoke to one of his mentors and said, I think I finally conquered this. And he said, I finally conquered writing a novel. And he said, you never conquer writing a novel, you just conquer writing the novel that you're writing. And so next time, now a lot of his books have been turned into really wonderful television series.
Yeah.
And he's a showrunner, right? And that was a whole new thing for him. So
Right.
he said it just pops up. You see it on your desk, you're like, oh, there's the imposter, and he'll go away. And so you experience it every time you start something new. It just goes away faster. You don't get hung up on it.
Yeah.
You don't become anxious about the imposter feeling.
And I think the more you're living your life and creating and building, and if you can start to reflect on, like, look at all the times I was feeling an imposter syndrome, and look what I was able to create,
Yeah.
and the results I got, and the success or the impact that I had from making this thing or creating
Right.
this thing, I can do it again.
Exactly.
It's like looking backwards to see the results.
Right. So you have this transferable sense of agency.
Yes.
Like self-efficacy is the way it's defined in psychology is like it's your it's your belief that you're able to do this certain thing. Agency is wider than that, and this feeling of being agentic. And I think that when you conquer imposter syndrome again and again, that feeling does become transferable.
Yes.
Right. And you're like, this is a totally new thing, but like I've never been part of this rodeo, but I think I'm going to be okay.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
You just know, okay, I've done this before many times, I can do it again.
And if not, I'll be okay.
I'll be all right.
I'll
survive.
Right, exactly.
I'm curious, I'm a big believer that self-doubt is the killer of dreams. I think when we doubt ourselves, we're not breathing correctly, we're shrinking, we're not taking any actions, we don't have the courage because we're just constantly in self-doubt. Do you think we can ever have too much self-belief?
I mean, geez, that's a tricky question. First, I think what you call self-doubt, I think of as personal powerlessness.
Yes.
And what happens is that it activates what we call the behavioral inhibition system. So it leads us to, be more pessimistic, to be more fearful, to think more narrowly, less creatively, to not
Yes.
take risks, to see people as predators, right? It inhibits us in every way. Even physically, like we can tolerate less pain when the inhibition system is activated.
Interesting, really.
Feeling personally powerful activates the behavioral approach system, which does all of the opposite. So it's like instead of seeing a challenge as a threat, we see it as an opportunity.
Interesting.
Instead of seeing other people as potential predators, we see them as potential allies and collaborators. We feel optimistic instead of pessimistic. Now, you can get to the point of feeling too powerful.
Right.
And in that case, I think that one of the things that one of the things that happens is that people they're not as good at taking other people's perspectives. So they're not as good at perspective taking when they become real. But this is a lot about social power. So when people have both social power and personal power, they're not as good at taking other people's perspectives because
Their feedback or their information or their ideas
just
or
understanding what other people are like. So
feeling.
It's honestly, it's really more about social power.
Got it.
As people gain social power, they're less dependent on others, and so when you have not much social power, when you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, you really need to be able to read other people's minds. Like you really need to understand what they're thinking because you're dependent on them. And as you gain more power, you're less dependent, and so you're more likely to stereotype people. You're less likely to be able to take their perspective. You just kind of forget what it feels like to be where they are.
Yes.
And so I think that's a problem.
yeah.
I think, there's a lot of research on overconfidence versus confidence. And overconfidence is, I don't even really fully understand like where it comes from. And I don't think it is overconfidence. I think it's a different thing altogether.
It's like ego.
Yes,
Yeah.
or like arrogance, you know,
Yeah.
it's and overconfidence, arrogance is often coming from a place of feeling threatened and defensive. And it's a
Or insecure
smokescreen for
almost.
insecurity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I say it's a smokescreen for insecurity. And
Right.
it's a way of deflecting. It's a way of preventing people from challenging you because honestly they don't find you pleasant. They don't challenge you because they don't like you, not because they believe you, right? So, I always say confidence, not arrogance. Confidence allows room to be wrong. So you can hear people. When you're confident, self-affirmed, you know who you are, you're able to hear feedback. You don't
Yeah.
feel like you have to steal the microphone all the time.
Yeah, confidence plus curiosity. It's like being
absolutely.
willing to be, okay, I feel confident, but also I might have a beginner's mind.
Totally. And if you're confident and you're excited about an idea, you should want that to be as good as it can be. And so, if you're around people who are offering you good feedback, confidence allows you to hear the feedback, which I think is really interesting. So I love watching Shark Tank.
Yeah, it's great.
I love reading the body language.
Yes.
Jonah, my son, and I used to watch this when he was younger. He loves reading the body language
so
and
good.
guessing who's going to do well. And I know you've talked to people about the
Yes.
body language of lying, and
Yeah.
it is so fascinating. I think this body language of arrogance is really
You can read it, you can feel it.
yeah, and it's also body language is also nonverbal vocal cues, like a certain way of speaking, and but it's like it's when they don't buy what they're selling. If you don't buy what you're selling, nobody's going to buy what you're selling. If you don't believe your story, nobody's going to believe your story. Not at least in the long run.
How do you learn to buy what you're selling?
Well, first of all, when people say, well, how do I sell something that I don't believe in? I say
Don't sell it.
You shouldn't be doing it.
Go find
That's
a different
what I
vision.
think,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Find a
you can
different
try,
career.
but I don't think you should. You need to check in with yourself about that. The whole there are different reasons why we don't buy what we're selling. You could not buy what you're selling because you're actually self-doubt. You doubt your ability to sell anything.
Okay.
Right? And that's different.
Then the product or the vision you
Right.
have.
Or it's just not interesting to you. It's not something that you would use, but it's not that you think there's anything wrong with it. So there are a number of reasons that you can fix, right? You can learn to understand, well, this product, really is helpful and valuable to these other people, and I need to understand their perspective, right? That makes you a more effective, salesperson.
Yes.
But there are also reasons that should lead you to go, I shouldn't be selling it, right? So you need to figure out, is it because I don't relate to it, or I don't believe in myself, or is it because there's something wrong with this thing?
Who are the people on Shark Tank that you see after their 1 or 2 minute pitch where you're like, they're going to get someone interested? If the numbers line up and everything works out just based on their body language, their belief, what do they have in common where you're like, yes, I would invest in them?
There is,
or I like them,
Okay, there are 3 kind of characteristics. The first is that you feel that they believe their story, that they just so deeply buy what they're selling. They really care about this.
Yes.
And it's with their body language. Sometimes they say it, and I'm not sure that helps. When they say and I don't think they're necessarily lying when they say it. Saying it isn't. It's you can just feel it. They convey it with their body language.
Their energy, their postural feedback, everything.
Right. There's also they're confident and not arrogant, and so they are open to feedback.
They're not like, this is the greatest thing in the world.
Completely. The arrogance is just it kills the whole. All the energy. Why would a shark want to invest if you're clearly not open to feedback? If you think you have all the answers,
right,
and if you start conveying that right away, you're out.
Yeah, why are you here in the first place?
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to buy what you're selling and convey that. You have to be confident and not arrogant.
Yes.
And that is, like I said, you show your confidence through your openness, your willingness to be open. It's not insecurity. It's not like, if you don't know the numbers, you're out. You do
Right.
need to know the numbers. You need to know certain things. But you can't know everything. That's why you're there.
Right, because you need support. Yeah.
Totally. And the last thing is that their verbal and nonverbal language is synchronized. So what they're conveying with their words, the feelings they're conveying with their words, match the feelings they're conveying with their body language. And if you see somebody like trying to, demonstrate like deep care in an issue, but their body language just doesn't line up with it.
They're crossing their arms, they're
Yeah,
turned
exactly.
to the side or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, or if they're trying to convey, I don't know, like confidence, but they're showing fear. That when we are fully present and just in it, that stuff becomes synchronized. We're not scripting our body language. We're bad at scripting our body language. We're best at scripting our words. Second best at scripting our facial expressions, ish. But below the neck, we forget about it all. Like people don't know what to do with their hands, for example, right? I don't know what, there was a 30 Rock episode about this.
Yes.
About not
Will
knowing what
Ferrell
to
is
do.
just like that. He's like in.
I can't remember. I just remember there were so many. Yeah, there was a whole episode about not knowing what to do with your hands. But people really don't pay attention to what they're doing with their feet and their legs. Like so, I don't know
How
if
important is body language with the feet and the hands when building trust and confidence with others?
It's funny. Have you ever had Joe Navarro on?
No.
Do you know who he is? Former FBI agent.
I want to have him on, yes.
You should.
Yeah.
He's great. He's such a character. I love Joe. He's a great guy also. But he has many body language books, but one of them is called What Every Body Is Saying, which I love.
Great.
It's clever. And, he really gets into the nitty gritty, but he says one of the things as an FBI agent, I think he did like counterintelligence, was to pay attention to people's feet. Like, so if you're questioning, and I'm not saying that this is, and I don't know what the
Actual
empirical
stats and
evidence is
fact,
on
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but that like if somebody looks like, if their feet are turned away from you and they want to run, he's paying attention to that. So but it's more if their feet are turned toward you and they don't seem afraid, he's more likely to believe them. Right, like if they
Right.
right, if
They're not
their
hiding
feet,
something,
that's
yeah.
the asynchrony.
Hey, I'm
If
here,
they're
open body
I'm fine,
position,
right?
yeah.
Exactly, and their feet are. So yeah, he thinks the feet are really important.
More than the hands?
Well, only because people are so unaware of what they're doing with their feet. So it's not that
You can hide your
necessarily.
hands, you can put them in your pocket, or
they're- yeah, exactly. They're just not thinking at all that my feet are going to give me away, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, but also I think there's really a lot of evidence that that feet, being grounded is really important to how you feel, right? So like, walking around, if you're speaking or something, I know this is like, I'm kind of switching a bit here, but feet can really help you feel better. Not like sometimes people will stand with their ankles crossed or not totally balanced. Like make sure that your feet, you feel that you're grounded and you feel that string, right?
Yes.
I have a friend named Rachel Kassar who used to be a professional ballet dancer and a rhythmic gymnast, and she does body language training now. And she's really into that feeling of being grounded and how much that helps you. Like, yes, you're connected to the ceiling, but you're also safe. You're connected to the floor.
Right.
Like, you're not going to fall through it. There's no
Yeah.
trap door. Allow yourself to find energy in that
Right.
feeling grounded.
It's fascinating how many psychologists talk about body language and the power of body language to just improve the quality of your life. I know Jordan Peterson, I think in his book, 12 Rules for Life, I think one of the first rules is,
Sit up straight.
put your back straight.
Yeah, I've heard that,
Put your
yeah.
back up straight.
Yeah.
It's like the rule for life.
That's the whole just
Put your shoulders back.
neutral posture, right?
Right? It's just like,
But the funny thing about that
you'll
is
have more confidence. You'll get more opportunities. People will like you more. It's like,
Yeah, I think that like the funny thing about sit up straight is that a lot of us heard it as kids from
we
grandparents.
resented it, right? It's like,
But also, I think part of it was because we were told to do it to show respect to others, and And the thing is, it's actually more about showing respect to yourself. Like, be self. You like that one?
Yeah, it's good.
Yes. Sit up straight to respect yourself.
Yes.
And if you respect yourself, you're more likely to be able to respect others. You know, it's you have to feel good about yourself to be able to treat others with sort of generosity and respect.
That's true.
So I think if we tell kids, well, you know, if you sit up straight, you know, you're going to feel better about yourself. They're more likely to be open to that.
You're going to feel more confident. You're going to love yourself more. You're going to feel
Exactly.
happier. You're going to have more to offer others as well.
Right.
When you
Right.
respect yourself, like you said, you're going to have more generosity, hopefully.
Right.
Or more.
So
more
the whole
full.
like sit up straight, you're being rude. If you
Yeah.
don't sit up straight, you know, kids are like, well, then I'm just going to be rude.
It's so funny because, you know, our parents' story of make your bed in the morning, you know, was something that
Oh, yeah.
I never did until I actually went to a boarding school that was kind of similar. They graded you every morning in the dorm
Oh,
to
geez.
make the bed
Is that
at
like a
6:30.
military school?
It wasn't military, but it was like just a strict kind
Yeah,
of boarding
okay.
school with rules and, you know, dress code and all that stuff. And I remember just like after that, when I went to college, I was like, I'm just going to, you know, wake up and let the bed be messy.
Yeah.
And then when I got to, I think it was like in my late 20s, I was like, I just don't feel good when I come back and look at a messy space. Let me try this out. Let me just start making my bed every morning and just spending 2 minutes, even though it's kind of a hassle, like, let me do this so I can come back and just feel at peace in my resting space.
Yeah.
Not messy.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I wish I would have wrote the book, Make Your Bed, because that came out like 5 years later and became like this
know.
massive speech and phenomenon. And I was like,
I know.
what our moms told us growing up, you know, for me, I was like, this has got to be a routine. Every time I don't make the bed, I feel like I have a sloppier day.
Yeah.
I feel less productive. I feel less proud because I disrespected my sleeping space.
Yes, those little routines like that
matter,
really
right?
help. I mean, that's the whole thing about being sort of neat is that it's self-respecting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, it also, I know yes, it clears your mind, right, to not have to worry about clutter. But I think the self-respect piece is a big part of it. Although for me, I was like an OCD bed maker as a kid.
Oh, so you were like,
It wasn't good. Like people couldn't sit, if somebody sat on it, I'd be like, you know,
Idiot.
yeah, it was weird. I had, you know, a lot of kids can go through OCD periods and not have it as an adult, but I definitely had some weird.
do you still have it
stuff
as an
like that.
adult?
No.
Okay.
No.
You can hug people and you can be messy. and
Sadly,
yeah.
I don't with the bed making.
Yeah, now you're messy bed, yeah. But
Yeah. No, it's funny because to me, you know, being a grown-up is about having freedom, you know.
you're like, I want to do what I want to do now.
Well, you know, it's like I have a lot of flexibility right now.
Of
And
course.
my son like called me the other day. It's like 10 o'clock, and he's like, "Are you still in bed?" And I'm like, "Yep." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Cause I'm a grown up,
'Cause I can
and
do what
I'm
I
allowed
want.
to be."
Yeah, I can do what I want.
Exactly.
So funny. Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's more of like, just what are the routines that are going to help you be optimized for that day and that
Right.
season of life?
Right.
There's certainly months where I'm like,
For sure.
okay, I'm just going to sleep in and I'm not going to do what I want to, you know, what I know I could do to be optimal performance. But that's the season what I need right now,
Yeah.
rest, recovery season.
Yep.
So it's being okay with that as well, and not being so militant like every moment. Which I think that's not helpful either.
Yeah.
When you're too obsessed, it has to be
No, for
perfect.
sure. Absolutely.
Got to hit every routine all the time and every minute. And
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
wake up at the same, you know, that's a lot.
They have to be your routines that work for
Ooh,
you.
yes.
I was talking to a friend of mine who was an Olympic skier and a national champion in women's downhill.
Lindsey Vonn?
No, but her name is Alex Wubbles, and
Okay.
she's a fascinating person because
Gotcha.
she had a second wave of fame. I mean, she was pre downhill skiing getting a lot of attention, right? So that was like 98 to 2002 was like her era. Her maiden name was Schaefer. So anyway, but her married name is Alex Wubbles. She became famous again about 5 years ago because she is now an emergency room nurse, and she was working at a hospital in Utah, at the University of Utah, and there was a car accident. There was a patient. She specialized in burn victims. He was badly burned. He was unconscious, and a police officer wanted a blood sample from him to see if he had alcohol in his system. By the way, it turned out he did not, and it was the other person was drunk. But really not the point. The point was that you cannot take a blood sample unless you have a warrant, or verbal permission.
Gotcha.
And he
was unconscious.
Right. So he couldn't give verbal permission, and they did not have the authority to do it. And she was defending this man, and nobody else really was. I mean, they were kind of being bystanders, and she was doing exactly by the books what she was supposed to be doing. Her voice is shaking. She's clearly really scared and not getting support.
Is it on video or something?
It's all on video. And this police officer eventually, he's just, this is not a statement about police officers. This is just an agitated guy, okay? And who was just like, I'm gonna get this blood sample.
Right.
He throws her against the wall and handcuffs her.
Oh my gosh.
And throws her into his cruiser and arrests her. And she's screaming. It's like 90 degrees outside the window. It's a really upsetting scene. And she absolutely did the right thing. So she became, known as people as this super brave person, and which she is. And I knew I wanted to interview her for my next book, but I didn't know her. I'm giving a talk at the Association of Critical Care Nurses. It's like 10,000 people. It happened to be in Boston, and I did, I think, the longest book signing line of my life.
Huh.
Nurses really relate to this material. I think
Grey's Anatomy has been on there 5 times,
well,
so they watch this show.
I think that there's a lot of power stuff going on in healthcare. It's tough, and they're exhausted. And anyway, I did the signing line, and there's one, and I was really tired. I loved signing lines. I love talking to people, but I was like exhausted
After
from
5
hugging
hours,
people.
you're like, okay.
It was a few hours, and I there was one last person, and she was with a man, and the man walks over, and as she approaches, I see who it is, and he says, I don't know if you know who this is. And I just like
wow.
I start
You're already
crying.
tired. Yeah.
She's crying. Like I knew exactly who it was.
gosh.
We embraced. I mean, we just like held on to each other. And she's like, you mean so much to me. Like your work has helped me so much. And I'm like, I am such, I'm such a fan of you.
Wow.
And I wanted to reach out to you. Anyway, it was Alex Wubbles. I did not know at the time that she was an incredibly good skier, and national champion many times. And I love skiing.
Yes.
Anyway, it turned out then we lived in Park City for 7 months through the pandemic, and she lives very close by, and we've
cool.
got to be very close friends during that time. Anyway,
that's great.
What's interesting is that she's a physically brave and socially brave person. Like to ski like that. Also, she's like the nicest person on earth. Like she would give us ski lessons and be like, well, what do you want to achieve today? Like just for fun, and like my husband wanted to be able to get his hips on the ground, and she's like,
wow.
we're going to make that happen.
Wow.
And by the end of the day, but she cheers, she's cheering for you. She's a great person. But I said, what are the similarities? Physically, going down the mountain, 70 miles per hour, and being brave in that situation. And she said for her, it's about like following her own kind of rule book. Mm-hmm. She said the best skiers are not skiers who have like take a one size fits all approach. Like, Lindsey Vonn, she likes fashion, she likes style, and people were really critical of that.
Yes.
And it's like, she's got to be able to be who she is to be the best at what she does. Like, why are you bothered that she likes to wear makeup and have nice clothing? Why does that bother people? The more she was able to be who she was, the better skier she was. And Alex said it was the same for her. The more she was able to do it her way, and she had a coach who recognized that. Like she needed an off day before races, and he was like, okay, I'm not going to force you to race. Like I realize that for you, you're going to perform better if you can do it that way. The bravery thing, there's this. She said, for me in that moment, I knew that like I could not live with myself if I did not, like this was just the right thing to do.
Yes.
And I had she said, There was no question that I was going to do this. And she said, I was following my rule book. She said,
My
to
values.
me, that's what's important. I knew that justice was important. Justice in this sense of, protecting this man's, sort of freedom, his rights. And she said, I just knew that. And I knew when I was skiing that I had to do it my way. And that allowed me to be, brave and perform at my best. So I think that that's really important. You got to figure out what are your, again, it's back to what are your values, and how can you be true to them? But she's just, she's pretty
That's cool.
wonderful.
I feel like I could talk to you for another few hours.
I know.
But I wanna bring us home here, and
All
we're
right.
gonna have you back on when the book comes out,
Good,
and
let's
have
do
you
that.
on for another long session where we're both recovered from surgery and yes.
I know. God, for sure.
I feel like actually the pain has been going away throughout this. I feel like
Good.
earlier in the day the pain was heightening, but with you, I feel like
Oh,
I've
I'm
just
so
been so
sorry.
excited about learning this, that this information has been so powerful. I've got so many notes here.
Oh, good.
So I'm just excited to go back through all this stuff. This is before I ask the final couple questions, again, I want to thank you, Amy, for being here. This is
You're welcome.
really inspiring.
Thanks for
and
making this work.
I've heard so many great things about you from all mutual friends over the
Likewise.
years.
Yes.
So I'm glad we were able to make this work. How can we, before I ask the final questions, how can we be of support to you right now? What's the thing that we can do to?
Thank you.
Is there somewhere we can go on your what social media are you most active on? Your website? Can we opt in for your newsletter? Can we get your
Yeah.
books? Is there a speaking tour you're doing? What can we do?
Follow me on social media. I'm on
Yes.
LinkedIn for sure.
Is that your main place?
It's funny. I have the most followers on LinkedIn,
Okay, I'm good.
and I don't post that often because I want to post really good, high, sort of longer, high quality content on there. Twitter, Instagram.
Yes.
Keep up with me on social media.
Amy Cuddy everywhere, right?
And
Okay.
and be for me, it's just sort of be brave, that would make me really happy. And it's okay if you say you tag me when you do it. I want to
Yes.
see it happening.
Yes.
But when you see, for example, somebody being bullied on social media, the way to handle that is not to attack the person attacking them. It's say something nice about them in the comments. Support them. It could be totally unrelated. Just say, say you see something, somebody being, trolled or whatever, and there's a pile on. Because that looks like the norm. So more and more people are doing it. Change the norm by being nice. Say, hey, so-and-so, I really like that thing you shared last week, and this is how it helped me. And it's amazing. What you'll see is more and more people will start being positive. That's a way of being brave. Be the one to make the first positive comment, to turn things around.
I love that.
That would make me feel supported.
Okay, cool. So if you're on Instagram, make sure to share this and tag Amy. Again, Amy Cuddy over on Instagram. Tag her that you're watching this or listening to this over on YouTube. Leave a comment below. Leave something positive about this. The thing that you enjoyed the most about this over on YouTube as well. Okay, this is a question that I ask everyone at the end. It's called the 3 truths question.
Okay.
So it's a hypothetical question.
All right.
Imagine many years away, it's your last day on this earth. You've lived as long as you want to live, and you accomplished all the dreams, and you have the life you want. But for whatever reason, everything you've ever created, your written word, this video, content, has to go somewhere else. It's not on this earth anymore.
Okay.
So it goes when you go.
All right.
Hypothetical. And the only thing you get to leave behind are 3 truths, 3 lessons that you've learned that you would share with the world. What would you say would be those 3 truths for you?
Oh my gosh.
Yes, off the cuff.
Oh my gosh, this is really hard. The whole haters gonna hate philosophy, the idea that people are there are just bad people and people are just gonna be bad. Don't buy into that. It's just keep trying. That the only thing that makes that absolutely true is if we believe it's absolutely true. So keep trying to be a better person, to model better behavior, to be optimistic about people, to have grace.
Yes.
I think that's the most important one.
Okay, that's number 1.
The second is, I'm going to quote Maya Angelou: stand up straight and realize who you are, that you tower over your circumstances. that is, again, Maya Angelou, not me, but I love that what it captures, which is carry yourself with a sense of pride and, and self-respect, and you will become more self-respecting and you will treat others better.
Yes. Okay.
That's the second. The third, I think, is like we just leave room for people to be weird. Like, you know what? Let people let their freak flags fly.
Yeah.
Like, don't put people in a box. Let people be different. Like, appreciate it. Just stop judging. Like, do your thing. Let your freak flag fly, and let other people do the same thing. Like, if they're not hurting other people, I like give people space to be themselves.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Those are powerful. I love those truths. Before I ask the final question, Amy, I want to acknowledge you for all that you've done, all the research, all the work, all the giving back to serve people and helping them gain confidence.
Thank you.
And improve the quality of their life. That's what my mission is with the School of Greatness, is to help people improve the quality of their life. And it's to bring people on like yourself that I've been inspired by for a long time to teach what you know. You have this information, this knowledge from deep research, practical experience, and teaching it to so many people that this audience could really use. So I'm grateful for your consistent dedication. I'm grateful for you being weird and starting to express that more on social media in the world, and accepting that, socially, by posting the stuff that is unique to you, the things that you love, and reminding us that we need to continue to be unique to ourselves as well and be willing to share that. And acknowledge you for the generosity you have with so many people. Again, I have so many mutual friends that say you're an incredible giver,
that's really
incredible,
nice.
kind human being.
Thank you.
So I really acknowledge you for the impact you've made on my friends.
Thanks.
And the person you've become. So I hopefully we can be friends after this and have you back on many
Absolutely.
times. And I want to see you continue to spread this message far and wide.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
What a
of course.
pleasure.
Yeah,
It's
of
been
course.
great.
My final question is, what's your definition of greatness?
I think greatness is. I think people might think of it as sort of about being the best, the most competent. I think it's a combination of being, yes, your most sort of effective self, but also your most generous self. So greatness has to combine those two qualities, right? It's about being both generous and capable.
Meeting women who believe in themselves and just being around that energy, it's just like that energy is going to bring you along. Because I think sometimes we think like, oh, I have to do all of this in my head, and once I fix it in my head, then I can go be around people. No. You need to go be around people, because that's what's going to fix it. Being in that environment, our community, our environment, it affects us so much.